Ms. Habba said how Donald Trump's due process rights were being violated because he was not being allowed to go and sit in on the oral arguments that are about to happen on the 25th of April in Donald Trump's immunity appeal. That is not what due process of law is. Due process of law under the Fifth and Sixth Amendment and under the 14th Amendment, they operate a little bit differently from one another, but due process of law is you having the right to not self-incriminate, you having the right to an attorney, you having the right to a defense, you have a right to face your accuser. Then there is the probable cause elements that need to be met before the grand jury can assess and issue an recommend an indictment, and then that indictment is filed in court. Then the court proceedings begin, and then Donald Trump is put on notice. And in civil procedure, the notice happens, and then there's service of process, and then there is discoveries. Same with criminal trials. After the indictment happens, there will be pretrial proceedings, and then there will be motions that we're seeing happen. Then we go into jury selection, and then the trial begins. All these steps that are put in the criminal context, that is the defendant receiving due process of law under the Fifth and Sixth Amendment. And then there's the due process of not being held liable for the same crime again in double jeopardy. And so due process of law means that a defendant is provided with each of these guardrails that guard against malicious or politically motivated prosecutions, or in any way contemptible prosecutions that should not be happening. So that is due process of law that is there to defend and keep the defendant's rights. And during the deliverance of justice, during the administration of justice. Now, Donald Trump does not have any requirement to go to the oral arguments at the Supreme Court. He does have a requirement of being at the Manhattan trial because he's the criminal defendant in that trial. But although Donald Trump is the petitioner in the appellate process of the immunity appeal in SCOTUS, there's no requirement for Donald Trump to be at SCOTUS when his lawyers argue his case. No requirement, as there is an argument as there is a requirement with criminal cases and criminal defendants having to be available during trial, during trial, and during the court proceedings. So Alina Habba went on Fox and lied to millions of people about what due process of law is. And, at some point, the Bar Association of wherever she is licensed to practice needs to look into her words and her actions, because she is misleading masses by lying about basic fundamental legal principles that underlie our jurisprudence. So, I find that to be great disservice to the people that someone like Habba would go out and talk about due process of law and claim somehow that not being able to go to the Supreme Court to hear the oral arguments, where Donald Trump has no role, has no sort of reason to be there, because it's just the attorney and the court, the 9 justices, and the attorneys of the two sides. Whereas in the trial, criminal trial, a criminal defendant has to be present for the trial to proceed should there be any development, should the court need criminal defendant in the instant case.